Thank you, Mr. Scott. That was a really good lead-in for what we'll be talking about this morning. Again, my name is Paul. I'm one of the co-lead pastors here. Have you ever felt alone? Yeah, felt alone. These are feelings we often don't want to sit with. These are things we often don't want to kind of process or talk about. And so I was going to have you say these things out loud, and I recognize it's like, maybe that's not the best idea. And so what I want you to think about is how did you feel in those moments of feeling alone? Where did you feel it in your body? Did you notice that your blood pressure or that your tension kind of came up? Did you feel like perhaps that you felt desperate or alone or isolated, right? That you feel like, wow, everything is closing in. When I was a kid, I wrestled a lot with anxiety. I didn't know that as a kid, right? I didn't know, this is anxiety. But I had just all kinds of worries. And anxiety has a way of kind of pulling at you and giving you these irrational fears. And so you kind of have to start rationalizing ways to deal with your irrational fear. And so one of those things for me was separation anxiety with my parents. And so both of my parents, they worked at the same place. And so they would often go to work, obviously, to be at the same time. And the anxiety for me as a kid manifested in a way where I would ask my parents to drive separately to work because I thought that if one of them got in an accident, then I would still have someone to care for me, right? Like this anxiety that just irrational fear, I had to rationalize, how can I do this? And I distinctly remember in 5th grade, we had just moved to Chicago. My parents had gotten a new job. And they were working at the same place, and because it was a new job, they had a meeting together, and so they had to drive to school, not to school, they had to drive to work together. They often would stagger because they were so gracious in caring for me and meeting me in my anxiety. But they had to drive together this day, and the plan was that they would be there when I got off the bus. But when I got home, they weren't there. And so they were fine, they were just stuck in traffic, but as a kid, I didn't know that. And this is before cell phones. We only had a landline, right, hung on the wall. I don't know if you remember those things, right? And I would always answer, Burger Residence, because our house was the Burgers, right, the Burger Residence. But as a kid, I didn't realize the distinction of that, so I just assumed that's how you answer the phone. Like Burger Residence, that's how you say hello. Anyway, so I had called, that was an aside, I called, I couldn't call them, but I called their office, and I said, do you know where my parents are? And they said, oh, they left a while ago. And so, again, my fears just shot up. And I just remember feeling like I am so stuck. Nothing else, I could see nothing else, I could think about nothing else. My irrational fears were running rampant. I was just imagining all of these scenarios. Who's going to take care of me? How am I going to be okay? What is going to happen? All of these fears, it was like the entire world was closing in around me. I felt so alone and so isolated. This is a really difficult place for us to sit with and for us to go into these things. And so I recognize, by the way, when my parents came home, it was like that lifted, right? It was as if like the cloud lifted and all of a sudden I was just embraced by my parents. They met me in that place of anxiety. And so this morning, I recognize that to talk about these kinds of things, these things that can make us feel alone and isolated, can really be a vulnerable invitation for us. And that even this feeling alone isn't always actually about being in proximity to other people. Sometimes there's people all around us, there's activity all around us, everything looks normal and everything looks fine, but we are finding ourselves feeling like the walls are closing in from every single side, that we just feel so alone, even if we're not actually alone. And so as we talk about this morning, I just want to name that this is a vulnerable place. And we're not going to be talking about these things to just evoke fear or to inflict further pain. But I really believe, as I've been kind of praying into this space this morning for this particular group of people that is gathered here this morning, I've really been praying into this space that I actually think Jesus invites us to attend to these places in our life. That this is vulnerable work. And I think that in attending to these places in our life, I think Jesus actually invites us into healing. And that's really significant because I think sometimes it can be so easy to not think about those things and to push them away, and that actually further isolates us and further makes us alone. And so we want to attend to this really vulnerable space this morning. We've been in this series on the miracles of Jesus, and Pastor Rick did an incredible and beautiful job of setting up that series for us as we looked at the feeding of more than 5,000, right? This kind of meeting the people in their fear. It was a beautiful invitation. And then last week, Pastor Scott preached a word. He bore witness to the ways in which God has been at work in his life and invited us along that same journey to asking, where is your let us go to ... He invited us into this, how are we exploring calling? It was a beautiful sermon. And so this morning, as I've been thinking about this Miracles series, it was really easy for me to kind of hold this at arm's length and think, how do we just talk about this stuff? Right? How do we just intellectualize or kind of have a cerebral activity of talking about these miracles? And what does this mean? And I was kind of struck by this invitation of, what if Jesus is actually inviting us to healing? What if in engaging these topics of talking about the miracles of Jesus, it's not just this intellectual activity, but it's actually an activity to be invited into that space of healing with Jesus? And so this morning, we're going to be talking about a passage where Jesus restores a demon-possessed man. And I'll be honest, that is quite outside my regularly everyday lived experience. It feels very other for me. It's not something that I have like a daily occurrence with. And so I think it's helpful for us to kind of digest and hold into this space. What is really happening here? And again, Mr. Scott did such a beautiful job of talking about kind of the holistic healing that Jesus invites, right? There's spiritual healing, but also the physical and emotional and mental healing that this man receives. And so I want to invite us into that kind of holding the tension of that space. And so as we begin, I recognize, again, this is a vulnerable place to be. And so I want to pray for us and pray that the Spirit, who I believe has actually already gone before us in some miraculous way, would meet us in this space this morning. So would you go to God with me in prayer? Holy Spirit, I recognize that this can be a challenging place to sit in. God, and I pray that in sitting in this space, we're not just doing a challenging conversation because it's a fun thing to do or it's the right thing to do. God, I pray that you would help us to recognize that any of my words this morning, God, may they even just all fall away. May the people in this room hear from you. And if they just need to continue to be still and quiet and in prayer with you, whatever that looks like, God, I pray for your invitation to healing. I pray for protection, that you would keep people safe, that this wouldn't be a triggering for anyone, but this would actually be invitational for people. God, that this would be a space in which we find you tenderly inviting us. That this is not a place of shame or of fear, but a place of freedom and of tenderness, of compassion and of mercy. And so, God, I pray those things over us this morning. Would you meet us in these spaces, we pray. Amen. Let's read this passage together. This comes from Luke 8, beginning in verse 26. And this is the continuation of the story that Pastor Scott preached on last week. Pastor Scott preached on Jesus kind of stilling the storm. The sea and the waves, they all calmed down when Jesus spoke to them. And after they've crossed to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, this is the experience that they have. So hear these words from Luke 8, beginning in verse 26. They sailed to the region of the Gerasenes, which was across the lake from Galilee. When Jesus stepped ashore, he was met by a demon-possessed man from the town. For a long time, this man had not worn clothes or lived in a house, but had lived in the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he cried out and fell at his feet, shouting at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, don't torture me." For Jesus had commanded the impure spirit to come out of the man. Many times it had seized him, and though he was chained hand and foot and kept under guard, he had broken his chains and had been driven by the demon into solitary places. Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "Legion," he replied, because many demons had gone into him. And they begged Jesus repeatedly not to order them to go into the abyss. A large herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside, and the demons begged Jesus to let them go into the pigs, and he gave them permission. When the demons came out of the man, they went into the pigs, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and was drowned. When those tending the pigs saw what had happened, they ran off and reported this into the town and countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they found the man from whom the demons had gone out sitting at Jesus' feet, dressed and in his right mind. And they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people how the demon-possessed man had been cured. And then all of the people of the region of the Gerasenes asked Jesus to leave them because they were overcome with fear. So he got into the boat and left. The man from whom the demons had gone out begged to go with him. But Jesus sent him away, saying, "Return home and tell how much God has done for you." So the man went away and told all over town how much Jesus had done for him. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Admittedly, this is a bit of a strange story, right? It's outside kind of our everyday lived experience, and so it's like, how do you wrestle or how do you grapple with what's being talked about here? When I was a senior in college, I took an independent study class. And this independent study class was one of my favorite classes. I took it with a really good friend and then also with Pastor Britta, which is probably why this was one of my favorite classes in college. We were just about to be engaged and kind of on the precipice of being married, and so it was an especially enjoyable class. But I also really enjoyed this class because it was one of our Bible professors, and they invited us to kind of engage in a particular topic over the course of the semester. And so the thing that I chose to study was angelology and demonology, so the study of angels and demons. It was mind-blowing, to say the least. I was exposed to all different kinds of literature and some different things, some inner biblical literature and some experiences and stories, and so it was a really, really fascinating semester. But I will admit, at the end of the year, I still didn't really understand. I still had a whole lot of questions, probably more questions. I was still quite confused. It didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. It still felt like this very other thing, this kind of removed experience for me. But the biggest takeaway for me that I think is really important for us as we think about engaging a story like this is kind of twofold. The first thing is that there is evil in the world. As I kind of unpacked this in this independent study, it became really obvious to me evil is a thing, that there are spiritual realities at work in our lives and in the lives of the world, right? That was true. At the same time, I also was very aware to me that there is also brokenness in the world, that people do get sick, that there is mental health and mental health issues. And so that both of these things were true at the same time. They aren't mutually exclusive of one another. There are spiritual realities and evil is real, and there is brokenness in the world, and there are things that just happen that we don't fully understand but are kind of a physical reality in the world. And so as I held these things in tension, I realized that this is a really helpful frame to understand some of these kinds of stories, because I think what happens is when we overemphasize or underemphasize one or the other of these things can kind of get a little bit out of sync. Right? If we just think that every bad thing that happens in the world is only because of spiritual kind of forces, then we miss kind of another important part of how the world, there is brokenness in the world. There are things that don't function. And if we just completely ignore the spiritual realm and we just think, well, it's all scientifically explainable and everything makes sense and everything is perfect, we again kind of get out of balance. And so the invitation I want us to hold this morning is that there are spiritual realities and there are physical or brokenness realities. And both of these things exist within not within conflict of each other, but within tension with each other. Does that make sense? This kind of frame and this lens, that there are spiritual realities and there are physical or brokenness realities within our world. And so I think this is a helpful frame as we engage a story that, again, admittedly can feel like, I don't really understand what's going on here. We may not understand fully what's going on here. And so as I've been kind of praying into this space, there were three realities that kind of just all of a sudden kind of came to mind. I've talked about before, I'm not really a three-point sermon preacher. I think that can become a little bit too prescriptive. I think it can be too simplistic. And so by no means do I think this is exhaustive. By no means do I think that these are the only 3 points about this particular passage. But I do feel like there was this invitation from the Spirit to say these are 3 realities that we need to wrestle with this morning. And so the first reality that I want us to kind of sit with is that Jesus speaks into our brokenness. And even perhaps more profoundly about this passage, Jesus speaks to our brokenness. Right? We have an experience here of Jesus speaking directly to these evil manifestations that are affecting and afflicting this man. Jesus speaks to our brokenness. And this should come as a great comfort to us. I want you to think about kind of the drama of this story. Right? These disciples, they have been with Jesus, and they've Jesus has said, we're going across Galilee. He knows where they're headed, and he invites them, here's where we're going. We're going across the Sea of Galilee. And they have this insane experience. These fishermen who are well-versed in squalls and raging waters, they themselves are afraid. And so this is a massive storm, as Pastor Scott talked about last week. And they all of a sudden, the storm is calmed by Jesus. Jesus is shown to have authority over all of creation. And so they have this dramatic, life-altering experience. And as they come across to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, they're affronted by this man with significant affliction. It's as if the mirroring of the storms that have happened on the sea are mirrored in the storms of the inner turmoil and then the external turmoil that this man has caused. And what's so interesting is as they come across to the other side, they're affronted by this man who it says has been possessed by demons. And that before Jesus says anything, this demon kind of professes, Jesus, Son of the Most High God, don't cast me out. Right? This evil is recognizing the authority of Jesus. And we hear that this demon possession is named later as Legion, which in the most kind of direct translation is literally to say an army of evil. So on a scale of like things are going great to it's not looking so hot, this is about as awful as you can imagine. Right? Like you couldn't get any further away from things not looking very good when you're talking about demon possession or you're talking about evil. This is an army of evil. And even the thing furthest removed, the farthest thing of not looking very good, it's not looking very great, the most evil thing that you could think of it's described that way intentionally, even the uttermost side of something that evil recognizes the authority of Jesus. It recognizes that Jesus is in control. It recognizes that Jesus is the one who has power. And this comes on the coattails of Jesus commanding the waves and the wind to be calmed, to be stilled. There is nothing outside the boundary of Jesus' influence. Let me say that again. There is nothing outside the boundary of Jesus' influence. There is nothing that is afflicting you. There is no brokenness. There is no part of your life or your story that is outside the boundary of Jesus' influence. Do you hear that this morning? There is nothing outside the boundary of Jesus' influence. It all matters to God. And so what happens is as Jesus is affronted and the demon kind of says, it recognizes Jesus' authority. And what does Jesus do? Jesus speaks directly to that brokenness, directly to that force of evil. Jesus deals with it, affronts it head on. And what Jesus does is he asks the question, what is your name? He invites that brokenness or that evil to be named. And there is significance in that. As I was reading this passage in preparation for this morning, I kind of all of a sudden realized the man is never given a name. We never hear about the man's name, but we are given the name of what is afflicting him. And I think that's really significant because I think we have to name the things that are afflicting us before we can deal with kind of moving on or moving beyond those things. right? Like when my parents weren't there and I was just kind of crippled with anxiety, I could see nothing else. This affliction, this evil is so all-consuming for this man that he can see nothing else. There is no way that this man can engage with anything else in reality. He can't engage in relationship. He can't engage in conversation. This thing is all-consuming and he can see nothing else. And so Jesus invites this thing to be named so that he could recognize what's keeping him from engaging in the rest of the world, from engaging in relationship, from engaging in being healed. And so I want to just take a quick moment to say that I think before we move on, it is very important for us to attend to naming these things in our own life. To being able, it's a vulnerable place. But I also think that this passage shows that Jesus cares about the wholeness of our being. That Jesus cares, yes, most certainly about the spiritual health. And Jesus cares so much about the physical and emotional and mental health as well. Both of these things matter deeply to Jesus, and so both of those things matter deeply to us. And so to kind of put this into modern day language, I want to say that attending to mental health is so important. This past weekend, our kind of local regional churches gathered together for an annual meeting, and our superintendent, Greg Yee, he shared this statistic. He said that 60% of youth are facing depression. 60% of youth are facing depression. It is very real that mental health struggles are very, very real, and they matter to Jesus and they matter to us. In my own story, in the past, I have had counselors who have helped attend to these broken places in my life. They have helped me to move away the cloud that has kind of been keeping me from seeing things more clearly. And so I just want to say before we move on that if you need help, please find help. Please extend the invitation that you can come and talk to us. We aren't the ones who know how to do this best, but we want to get you in contact with someone who does. If you need to be connected to a support group or to a mental health counselor or a mental health care professional, we want to help you find that connection. I recognize that even being willing to name those things can be incredibly vulnerable. And so if you just need someone to be there with you, to kind of wrestle with what does that look like, we want to be here with you. Your spiritual health, it matters to us, and your mental and physical and emotional health matter to us. And so we want you to attend to these things. And we want to help attend to these things with you because we believe that Jesus cares about the totality of our healing. And that actually leads to the second kind of truth that kind of came to mind as I was preparing for this morning, and that is that Jesus completely restores the humanity of this man. Jesus completely restores the humanity of this man. Very intentionally within the passage, there is language that's used to describe kind of the absolute and uttermost affliction that this man is experiencing. First of all, when they cross the Sea of Galilee, they're going to a boundary outside of what is their home or their comfort. So they're already kind of on the outskirts. So they're in an outsider place. And as they come up on the shore and they are affronted by this man who has been afflicted, it says he's been afflicted by an impure spirit, right? The spirits that are afflicting this man are unclean. And those spirits are then driven into pigs, which in Jewish faith was an unclean food, which again highlights this is an unclean kind of circumstance, an unclean and impure place. And it says that the afflictions that this man has faced caused him to be naked and not living in a home. He is completely exposed. And it says that this man has been living in the tombs, which means he's been living in proximity to those who have died. And in those days, for religious kind of purity, you would have had to gone through a purity cleansing process to be allowed to be in contact with anybody else because he's been in proximity to the dead. And then it says that he couldn't even be contained. It was like there was such inner turmoil that the external turmoil was that the chains couldn't even contain him. He is in complete and utter shock. This has completely defined this person. And all of this language is very intentional to show that this man is the absolute furthest away from the things that you would consider healthy and whole. Right? He is experiencing the absolute extreme of unhealth. He is experiencing the absolute extreme. He's the most unclean of unclean. He is unreachable. He's untouchable. He's beyond hope. There can be no hope for this man. And what happens? Jesus goes there. Hear that good news. The most unreachable, untouchable, furthest, most hopeless circumstance and scenario. All of this language building up, not to just say that this man is bad or unclean, but to say that he is the furthest removed from hope. And yet Jesus goes there to meet this man and to be in proximity to him. Jesus comes right up close to this man. He gets right into the thing that was considered the most unclean, the most unholy, and professes healing. It invites this man to name what is afflicting him and then to heal this man. I want to say that no matter your story, no matter how unclean or impure you feel, Jesus goes there to that place. Jesus gets up close and gets into proximity with the thing that would be considered the most hopeless, the most furthest extreme, and Jesus gets up close. There is nothing that can separate you from the love of God. Nor height, nor depth, nor angels, nor demons, nor anything in all of creation can separate you from the love of God. Jesus gets up close. And when Jesus gets up close, he restores the totality of this man's humanity. You see, all of these descriptors have gone to show that this man has almost become unidentifiable as human. All the things in that day and that culture that would define a person as kind of being built into society and having right mind, all of those things have been removed. And so it's as if this man is no longer discernible as a human. And you hear this dramatic shift as Jesus comes and gets in proximity to this man's story. He is completely and totally healed and restored in the entirety of his humanity. In verse 35, it talks about the people in the town hear that Jesus has cast out these demons. And when they come to meet this man, it says that they found the man from whom the demons had gone out. This impure affliction has left him. It is completely gone. He is now sitting at Jesus' feet. The affliction that this man had where he was breaking against these chains, he's now calm and is at Jesus' feet. He is dressed. He is no longer exposed. He is no longer living in the tombs. He is no longer naked. He has been dressed and he is in his right mind. Most literally, that means that all of the voices have stopped. To be in his right mind literally means he has found silence. The things that have been afflicting him have been quieted. And this word for right mind is actually a compound word in the original language in Greek. And it's these two words that mean salvation and understanding. The man's fullness of his understanding, the way he understood himself, has been saved. It can literally refer to the innermost chambers of your heart. The depth and the place of this man where he's understood who he is and the humanity that he has, that thing has been healed. This is a totality of healing, not just a physical, being healed of physical affliction, not just of spiritual affliction, but all of it, the totality of it. This man's understanding of who he is has been saved. And in verse 36, it says, the people come up and they see that he has been cured, which is the same word, that's the first part of the word for saving. So not only has he been cured, he has experienced salvation. There's a salvation element to this, that the healing this man has experienced has been absolute and utterly total. His humanity has been restored. And this, I think, leads to the third point that I think is sometimes so easy to miss. And I think sometimes we forget how painful this thing is in dealing with mental health or afflictions or brokenness in our own lives. So Jesus speaks directly into our brokenness, speaks to our brokenness. Jesus restores this man's humanity, restores the totality of our humanity. And the third thing is Jesus reconnects this man to community. And that's essential. That's an essential part of healing. Jesus reconnects this man to community. As you hear all of these afflictions described in the first part of this passage, it says that the man was driven into solitary places. And the word that's used there to describe solitary places literally means a desert. But metaphorically, it also means to be in a deserted place, to be deserted by those closest to you. And so the afflictions that this man is experiencing have driven him so far that the relationships most close to him, the most meaningful relationships of family, of friendship, of kinship, are all severed. These afflictions have driven him so far that he is in a desert place, deserted by every meaningful relationship. And so on the flip side of that invitation, it was really strange to me as I was reading the end of this, and he asks to follow Jesus, and he says, no. Like, what? But what Jesus does is Jesus sends this man back home. Whoa. Jesus reconnects this man to home. Now, the word that's used there for home is a word that you may have actually heard before. It's this word oikos. Have you ever heard the word oikos before? Right? Greek yogurt. Like the Greek yogurt, oikos literally means in Greek, home. I recognize this is heavy, so this is a really bad joke. If you need help remembering, the afflictions send the man into the desert, and Jesus reminds the man to go back to the dessert. In my notes, I literally wrote yogurt joke, and I was like, I don't know if I should say this. Jesus reconnects this man to his community. He sends him back home, which is again a metaphor. As it was desert to be deserted, to be back home is to be reconnected to his household, to his kinship, to the relationships that matter most. And he sends him back with a purpose. He says, go and tell them what I've done for you. You are now my witness, to bear witness to the full and totality of healing, to remind people of the fullness of their humanity. He reconnects this man to community, an essential part of healing. You see, I think one of the greatest lies that evil tells us is that somehow these places of brokenness can be the only companions we're allowed to have. Right? I think it's fascinating to me that the affliction that this man is facing is in the plural. It's a legion. It's literally like this plethora of things. And so this plethora of things is the only thing that you're allowed to have as your companion. These are the only companions you're allowed to have. And so when people face mental health issues or we find ourselves in these broken places, sometimes it incapacitates us. It is literally not possible for us to connect in community because the affliction is so great we can't move past it. But other times I think we hear the lie that somehow these afflictions, these broken places are somehow enough companion for us. That these things are the only thing that we are allowed to have. This is the only thing that we can do. And I think perhaps the most nuanced and prolific way in which we buy the lie from evil is that we aren't worthy to be in community. That somehow these broken places are just too much. We're too unclean. We're too impure. There's no way we could be in meaningful relationship. And that is the greatest lie of evil. You are not alone. You are not alone. Jesus reconnects this man in healing to community, to people that matter, to meaningful relationship and connection. And our call as the church is to go out into the world and to say, you are not alone. You are not alone in your addiction. You are not alone in your brokenness. You are not alone in your mental health struggle. You are not alone. And to get up close and to be proximate to people's brokenness in our own brokenness. And this is the totality of the healing that Jesus brings to this man. Yes, there's a lot of things we still don't understand about this passage, but I think what is so profound is these feelings of being alone, are the mental health things that feel like the walls are closing in. The most totality of healing is to be reconnected into community and to be reminded that we are not alone. Jesus meets us in these places. Jesus wants us to meet others in these places. We are not alone. And that's what we profess as we come to the communion table. One of the reasons we say that all are welcome at this table is because this is Jesus' table, and this is the work that Jesus invites people into, is this reconciliation and restoration and healing. And so when we come to this communion table, we are reminded that Jesus speaks into our broken places. That there is nothing outside the boundaries of Jesus' influence. And as we come to this table, we are reminded that Jesus desires a totality of our healing. Our spiritual, our mental, our physical, our emotional, the fullness of our humanity is brought into restoration with Jesus. And as we come to this table, we were reminded that we are not alone, that we are reconnected into community at this table. This is what Jesus has for us. This is what Jesus calls us to. So as we come, I just want to invite you. I recognize that this is a vulnerable place. And if you just need some time, please take it. If you need someone to come alongside you in prayer, our prayer partners will be here. One of us is around. Come and find us and pray. If you just need some space to be still and silent, to find Jesus inviting you to sound-mindedness, to stillness, I invite you to be still. And then as you're ready, to come to this table.